Today is March the 5th, 2013. My name is Tanya Finchum. I'm with Oklahoma State University with the Oral History Department in the library. And I'm here in the Geography Department with Dr. Steve Stadler. So thank you for having me today.
My pleasure, I think, so far.
Let's start with learning a little bit about you, beginning with when and where you were born, and then we'll work our way forward.
I was born, in 1951 in Summit, New Jersey, which is outside of New York City. And my father was an executive with Sherwin-Williams. So we moved when I was 3 to northeastern Ohio, where he was a personnel manager at a Sherwin-Williams facility. To where did we go? To Illinois, the Chicago area, where he was personnel manager at their large paint plant in Chicago. And I went there through sophomore year in high school. Then we moved to the Cleveland area, where I finished high school, and then went to undergraduate school at Miami University in Ohio.
And then PhD?
I did a master's too. I did a master's at Miami University in geography. Excuse me, and then a PhD at Indiana State University in physical geography.
At what point did you decide geography was the route you were going to go?
I was a social studies education major with the undergraduate degree. I have a BS in Ed. And they made you take in 2 areas, larger areas. They made you take a lot of history, but some other things. And I had geography and economics. And so I just got, I guess, hooked on geography and became a geographer. Then I said, well, what would this be like? And went to master's school. I wonder what if I could get a PhD, and I did that. So here I am. It was was very unplanned in that way, I guess.
And then was this your first job as a PhD?
No, I had essentially a visiting assistant professor job for 1 year at Michigan State University in East Lansing, and then I came here. So it was almost my first job, but not quite.
And what year was that when you came here?
1980. I've been here since 1980. 30. This is working on, I don't know how many, a lot of them. This is my 33rd year I'm working on for Oklahoma State.
Your area of focus, though, is climatology, right, or not?
Yeah, and physical geography, but within that climatology, to be sure. Yeah. So it's the physical side of geography.
And did you have a mentor?
My mentor was a guy named Dr. John Oliver, who became afterwards a close friend, and he's now passed away. But he would have been my mentor throughout my time at PhD school. But he also did various things, including writing together and being at conferences and things like that. So. Yes, I had a mentor. So it's another father figure.
Were you debating between here and another?
Yes, I had a job offer at Louisiana State, and I came here instead because I felt like it was a better fit for me in the department, and also that my wife and son, this would be more what they would have been used to, rather than Baton Rouge is such a different culture, really. So we came here.
And stayed.
So far.
So far. And the main reason we're here today is to talk about the Mesonet.
Mm-hmm.
So can you give us a little bit of background, explain what it is, and then tell us a little bit more?
The Mesonet, that term is sort of short for mesoscale network, and it has to do with the spacing between observation stations. And this is something that grew, started really sort of with separate ideas on campus of OU and OSU. So it's been a joint show the entire way. And OU, of course, has School of Meteorology and a very good mesoscale bunch of professors that were looking at storm scale modeling and all sorts of things, wanted to know more about storms and things. And we didn't have the right kind of measurements, at least consistently here in the state. At OSU, there was a guy over in agriculture named Billy Webb who called me up one day and said, "Hey, we're taking these observations and at our experiment stations." He was in charge of the experiment station personnel, and we're taking all these, and that's nice, but we can't look at it or do anything when we get a call with from the public. We don't know what we've done until we see it published, and that publish with the government. What was like 6 months later or something like that. It was way after the fact. And this was the Cooperative Observation Network, which just to this day it has for over 100 years. But with those, you get a temperature, high and low temperature during the day, and precipitation amount, basically. And so he said there has to be a way to modernize all this. So on campus, we started to talk about that. Then one day, I got invited down to Norman because they were dedicating a new National Weather Service building. Now, this is the building that they were in before the building they're in now, which is National Weather Center in the South Campus. This is on north part of the campus next to the airport. And so they were dedicating this nice new building. I happen to know that the meteorologist in charge, Ken Crawford. And so I got an invitation, went to that. Then I wrote back the next day, "Thank you for this is a good thing that we did. This is great for Oklahoma. And by the way, we have this idea here at OSU to put together a series of observation stations on our experiment station. That's what we wanted to do." And after I got that, I think I got a phone call, and I was there. Or they were up here in my office, I think the next day after they got that thing, and they said it's Ken Crawford and his dean, Jeff Kemple, that time, and they said, "Well, we want to do the same thing, and here's what we're working on, like this." And so we said, "Well, really put this together because we both want observation network for different purposes." And that's where this cooperation and union came from, and it's been a very powerful cooperation, and it's been one that's the American Academy for Advancements of Science called it the gold standard for networks. We were the first state network in any kind of overview sense, and we remain probably the strongest state network. We did this before anybody invented the internet, I think. So when we started doing things, there was no internet pushing of the data, anything else like that. We were doing things with dial-up modems and all like that. So it's something that a lot of people worked on. There were a lot of partners. It was done in a logical way, and it certainly is worked. There's lots and lots of benefits in various realms for education and science and National Weather Service with short-term forecasting and all like that. So it's something that we didn't know probably when we started this how important or how big it would be.
Well, how did they decide on the Mesonet for a name? Was that the original?
I don't know who decided on that. Now, it makes some sense because I had seen that word in print before, where a researcher set out a mesonetwork when they were doing precipitation observations or pre-storm environment stuff and like that. But those were only out a short time, having to do with some kind of experiment. We're talking about something that's been deployed on the landscape for quite a long time now. And I don't know who came up with that term. You would have to ask somebody in the actual meteorology community. But we didn't coin that term. It's with a capital M. Mesonet means our mesonet, and I think we had the trademark on that. But it means network of stations, but meso meaning this middle scale. The federal government has observation sites at stations. usually at, when they say stations, usually at airports. And they're fairly far spaced apart. These are, over Oklahoma, we, this network was like 10 times as dense as the original government stuff the National Weather Service was doing. Plus, there are some in southeastern Oklahoma. There was none south or east of McAllister that the government had, none in the Oklahoma Panhandle. So we cover the state fairly evenly with, well, now it's 120 sites. And it started out as 107 or something like that. But it's a middle scale thing is the idea, a meso network. There would be micro networks where we would somebody could put out something for an experiment, and you have sensors every meter or something like that. But this is different. So this covers the state, and we can pick up a lot of things that we're going between the cracks in the other measurements.
At least one spot in each county, then.
At least one spot in each county, and that's for, of course, that there's a geographic reason for that, but there was also a very good political reason, because every legislator basically had one in his or her district. There was always somebody to speak up. That's what we've encountered, and so that pushing this over to the schools, that was part of the strategy, is to make it go. And when you have a teacher come in and cry in front of the legislature or something, a committee, this is very powerful stuff. So we have tried to make it, in a way, something for everybody. It is a multi-purpose system, but it is not just a research system. It's an observational system in which we do lots and lots of work to make sure that data are good, and that's a very long explanation, and some of our people at OU could give you that explanation better than I can. But we do both spatial and time quality control, quality assurance, and so that we know if certain sensors look wrong in their context over time, or with the surrounding sensors, and we're able to figure things out. Because with the Meso network, everything is the data, everything. And we always make sure we've labeled those data if they're questionable in some way. And so everything's calibrated and quality checked, and you could pretty much count on those data as you get them out of our archive. And we started in 94, beginning of 94, we officially turned the switch for all the stations and declared ourselves operational. And those stations report back, they report back every 5 minutes. So we have 5-minute data for all these sites since 1994. It's getting to be quite a period of record, with lots of different kinds of measurements. Not just, we can figure out things on the fly all the time. How much rain has there been since the first of the month? There's all sorts of possibilities with this. But we also take soil temperatures and solar radiation and winds and sod temperature, and just all sorts of stuff is out there. And so it's quite a bit bigger suite of things than we would get out of the cooperative observations, which again typically are minimum, maximum temperature, and daily precipitation. We can tell you how much it precipitated, but also what when it precipitated, basically what was the rate of precipitation. Things. So it's not everything possible that could be out there, I guess, if you had unlimited money, but it's a pretty good set of things for the funding we've had. We decided how much we could go after, and got it, and then put out a network and kept it going.
Governor Bellman was in office.
Yeah, it was Governor Bellman's watch when we were cooking this up, and we went to his office, and we had an audience with one of his main aides. And I happened to speak for OSU, and then we had a couple of people speaking for OU, and the point was that the universities wanted the same thing. And here's what it would cost to start this thing, and it was a couple $1,000,000 we were asking for. And we're pretty bold. Go in there and ask for a couple $1,000,000. And I said, well, both universities want the same thing. And it's like, the aide's thinking about that. Ooh. And that was sort of that's good for everybody kind of thing. Yeah, push the money to the universities, that's good. And then both universities get part of it. Everybody looks good. And we've always used that kind of association, but it's been a very real association between the universities. So we originally were funded on the startup from a nameless company, Exxon, had been asked by the government, more than asked, directed by the government to give some monies back to the state, energy-related monies, because they had somehow overcharged people for petroleum products. And so those were called the oil overcharge funds. And we got $2 million out of the oil overcharge funds. And we did on that way. Our justification was that we could save if you knew something a little bit better about the weather and the moisture conditions out in the field. This could save you a lot of money in terms of how much you irrigated, how much water you would have to bring out of the ground. I mean, it was very clear that in energy terms, the system would pay for itself. And indeed it has. I mean, it's not that you don't have to pay for it, but in terms of the public good, there's no doubt that there's a lot of things that depend on it now. So we got it out of Governor Bellman's office, and he was always a backer of the Mesonet network. But so have the other governors since. They've all been good to us. But we've also, of course, with the legislature, trying to have the legislature educate them to what we're doing. And so they understand it's an OU-OSU show or OSU-OU show. Whatever your preference is, that's okay. And we try to make ourselves, in the guys, really a sort of a utility, something that's necessary in the state. And we've done pretty well in that political realm. It's really, there's a lot of things that it's like, in a way, it's like apple pie. It's sort of transcending the one side of the aisle or another. Just the backing of this over the years has been from both sides of the aisle.
Do you still have to go every
I don't.
session, or
No, I don't.
someone has
We
to?
can't. We do not lobby directly in that way. We certainly have people from OU and OSU that are whatever they call them, but are people with our legislative liaisons that the universities have to begin with. But one of our board members, steering committee members, is the guy from the College of School of Atmospheric Sciences down there that actually has to go to the legislature for various things. And it's a matter more of educating, keeping people up to what's going on, what are the benefits, because we have a very nice long set of things, anecdotally or whatever, and with numbers that we can show what the value is. And so it's a matter of educating people. So we're very occasionally anymore, I might go and see somebody there, but that's very occasionally. We're in this peculiar position that we're not a state agency. There's, in terms of Oklahoma law, it is in Oklahoma code now that the University of Oklahoma and Oklahoma State University together shall run a Mesonet network. So we can't be tampered with real easily by a governor that wouldn't like it. And again, the governors have been good to us, or some legislator that gets a wild hair. There would have to be a vote on whether there's going to be what they were going to do. They would have to change the code. And so we are an entity, but we're from universities rather than private sector. We're not elected, so it's always been a strange kind of thing.
Well, when they first went operational in 1994, was there a celebration or a fanfare or any kind of ceremony?
I think we did a little bit of media kind of splash where we said, yeah, this is working now. And it was apparent, I think, to a lot of folks, anybody who was looking, that really that it was going because all the TV stations all took a feed of it. They have to pay for it because they retransmit. They turn it around, repackage it, and all like that. But that all went well, and they all wanted in, so they're paying not a huge fees, but they're paying fees, a few $1,000s a year per station, and depending on what their market area is, to use the stuff. And I think it got a lot of notoriety in that way. And I don't remember a cutting the ribbon celebration in that way, because it certainly would have been like January 1st of 1994. Maybe Ron Elliott or one of the other people involved could remember that better. We have had some celebrations after that, when we went so many years with the steering committee and thinking about things and having a cake or something like that, or going past so many observations, and I don't remember how many we've gone through now. It must be 5 billion by now, and I'm not kidding. So there's huge amounts of data out there. Can be used for lots of things. So
No, it's primarily agricultural.
no, it doesn't have to be. We designed this so that it is taking standard data in standard ways, so the Weather Service could use it, or anybody else that's using standard surface observations can use it. There are agricultural things that are hooked onto that network, and like, for instance, we have the wind speed at a meter and a half or something like that, and that's down around crop height. So you know how much air is moving over that crop. Now, usually the winds, unless you're told otherwise, are taken at 10 meters, and that's, they say here's the wind speed at the Oklahoma City airport. It's at 10 meters at 33 feet. But we have a lower wind gauge. We also have temperatures we take at the top of the tower, because the temperatures are usually taken down here if you're not told anything else. And up there, when you look at the difference in the temperature, and you can see if there's an inversion where there is a cap on how the air is going to mix. We have the solar radiation, which at all the sites is the largest solar radiation exposure in the country, basically. So we have lots and lots of solar data, but that has to do, of course, with energizing plants. And then we have temperature probes under sod and bare soil material at every site. And we also have soil moisture measurements, volumetric soil moisture measurements, where you can figure how moist that soil, well, not your soil maybe, but that soil there at that site is. And usually the surroundings have something to do with it, but in terms of are related to that. But that's the biggest system like that I know of, I think, in the world, where you have all the soil moisture sitting there too. So lots of good things for agriculture. But also, when we say if it's for agriculture, there's what we call value added, and that's taking the data and working them around in some way. For instance, we have a big thing called OK Fire, and it takes the Mesonet data and then some satellite data. I guess it's bi-weekly satellite data. Puts those together and talks about how fast, if a fire got started, it would burn out there right now. Things like that. Looking at it the other way, should you be burning today? Then about how much should you irrigate for a particular crop, or how far along in its life cycle is an insect likely to be, because they're like little microchips, they've been pre-programmed. And so when you have enough heat units, the critter will go through whatever stage in its life cycle. Some stages you can spray it, and other stages it doesn't do any good. So we have a lot of things out there for agriculture. We have cattle thermal stress index now that can be gotten. There's all sorts of stuff out there. So there's a lot of value added that it is specific to agriculture. But it's not just agriculture. Again, it's not just for us here on the campus, but certainly a number of people on the campus, the researchers, have picked this up and are using this in their work.
Had you envisioned it growing so much back in the 80s when you first thinking of?
We just wanted to, Ron Elliott and I always would say, oh, we're working on this and we're coming. We did innumerable trips between the campuses. I mean, it was just boom, 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 boom for a while. And we're driving along and think, well, what is it? What if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't work? What if this doesn't work? Well, now we're to the point is, oh, this is still going. It's still working. And we're always afraid that it wouldn't work. But after that, because there have been so many people involved in various realms, both within our organization, Mesonet organization, but also other entities like National Weather Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, the emergency management people of the state of Oklahoma, that those people have all had good ideas, and that we have played on those good ideas and made products to serve the ideas. So the answer is, it's a lot bigger than we ever thought. We were just trying to bring data in and be able to see it. And then it got so much bigger than that, because as we were going along here, we got a World Wide Web that got out into the public, and you used to have to be a pretty savvy, but savvy enough computer person to get on the data. You could get the data, but you have to get a dial-up account, and it's slow, and it's a modem and things like that. Now we just go plunk plunk on the desk, and if I just a very few button pushes, and I can get any data I want for any of those stations from when they started. It's incredible. So it's a different era, and the computing has much improved, which has much helped us. As I said, we had maybe 5 billion observations by now, whatever it is, something like that. And at first that used to bother us, because we were storing things, I think, on magnetic tapes from mini computers. Well, there's no more mini computers. Well, there's no reason to have mini computers, because we're running the thing on a basis of microcomputers, actually, and the backup, that much data doesn't cost very much, and so it's all different than what we imagined, and that's allowed it to really prosper.
Have they migrated the older data then?
All the old data, it's all kept in the same database, and some of it's there's a database on the OU campus, but there's also it's also backed up and not on on campus too. So we're not going to lose the whole thing in any one fell swoop. But yes, everything is compatible. Everything is, if we say, okay, here's we've changed machines, that's no never mind to the user that wants to go back and get the data. What the savvy user does is look back to see whatever kind of flags we have on the data, which code the thing and says, this might be bad, or ooh, this is bad. We know that for sure this sensor was bad at this location, and that number, we're going to leave the number in the database, but if you use it, that's your problem. So that's for the more sophisticated user. The people generally do not have to. If you're using it on a casual basis, you don't have to worry about that, because we'll block out in the real time sense, or near real time sense, we'll block off data that just look awful, or something's wrong with. You won't ever see that up in the maps or any kind of products, because you can get data out of this Mesonet, but also there are just a number of mapped products that are produced all the time. I mean, just 24/7.
When you say we, you're referring to?
Not me. The Mesonet, most of our employees are physically in Norman, and that's where the Oklahoma Climatological Survey is, and it's been run out of that shop, really, in Norman, the Climate Survey, which is part of their school of whatever it's called, atmospheric and geographical sciences now, whatever. And so it was, we thought, very fitting and because of the talent pools involved and what we thought were going to be needed, that we have most of the employees there. And so it's not like one or two people. We have, what, 5 technicians or so that just simply go around the state and make sure that everything is cared for and all like that. I mean, we have some trucks. We have people that are computer operators. Some that are really programmers for the data. Some that are web designers. And we have there's just a whole set of people needed to keep this operation going in the way we know it to be going today. So it's a large task, and again, it's sort of on the size order of a couple $1 million a year to run, actually. So, depending on what grants contracts come in and what we actually have to spend for in equipment in any one year, because that all has to get refreshed over time. So there's a lot of people, and if I have an idea, this is what I would want to have. Here's a product that I want. How are we going to do this? They have to the team has to think about it, sequence it into their work. Sometimes it's a real easy boom boom, but other times you're asking for something that's going to take somebody some programming time, skill, and will take a while to get back to us in the queue or anybody in the queue. But when I say we, I mean that Mesonet team, actually, and I'm simply on the steering committee. I'm on which is supposedly the ultimate bosses that are overseeing the system. And so I'm not in a day-to-day capacity with that. We have a project manager, Chris Febrick, at the moment, and who does a great job at coordinating the employees and listening to what the steering committee says, and then coming back and trying to make that so. But also, he communicates to us what the employees are doing, what they're saying back to us to try to figure out how everything is working, because it's sort of a complicated situation. There are 3 members of the steering committee essentially from OSU and 3 from OU. So it's a 6-person steering committee. I think we're serving 3-year terms at the moment, and you can keep on there if you want. I've been on there since the start. So, in fact, before the start. So, as we were first talking about this back in the 1980s, for gosh sake, in the early 1980s is when people were first having the idea for this. But then it took a while to get people to see that this can be done. Technologically, it was not a terrific triumph or something like that. It's politically, and the way everything went together was the triumph. But the fact that it works like it does has been a very sound thing. And we point all happily and say, look, here's the investment the people of Oklahoma put in, and here's how much grant and contract money we've chased out of this, for instance. Here's the other things that are done for the state. So it's been a good thing. But there is very much a team, and it's not a teeny tiny team anymore. And I don't know if they could tell you how many we have in the payroll, but it's probably right now people that are being paid, including part-time out of Mesonet funds, somewhere between 30 and 40, I think. And so it's quite a few people, different talents involved. And so we have to look at what we're doing as an organization and try to advance people, give them the right pay raises and all that. There's all sorts of things to be considered that we would have never given. I don't know if we would have gone through with it if we had thought about that ahead of time, but that's it. It has become an organization. It's like Microsoft. That's why Bill Gates never thought this would happen like this. Just went off. So and then he had to figure out how to manage all this. And in our very humble way, we have to figure out how to manage what we've created, but also put us on the path for the future. Because we want to be not yesterday's Mesonet. We want to be on the cutting edge of what other kinds of instrumentation can be out there, or the kinds of devices and the ways to display and disseminate data. And so we're always trying to think ahead that way. So it's quite an effort.
In the very beginning, was it hard to get landowners to agree
No.
to host them?
They're the best. The best. We had a couple scouts out there. Dr. Carlson in our university here was, I think, scouting the eastern sites. And although there's always the idea is you have to get a suitable site, and we had site standards that go along with the World Meteorological Organization standards. So we're trying to something that, in a way that looks official, and we can say, yes, you can depend on our measurements. Because if you put something next to this brick building here, it's going to sense what's next to the brick building, not any kind of surroundings. So Dr. Carlson looked around at all this stuff, and from everything we heard from the different parts of the state, the landowners really weren't the problem. There were people that said no, but not very many. And basically, what they do is cut us a long-term, no-cost contract for us to be on the land, and we take up about 10 by 10 meters at every site. Now, some of them, of course, we don't worry about too much. We have an understanding, actually there's probably a memo, so I remember, with the Ag Experiment Station and things like that. So we have all these sites around, which is OSU-owned land, so that becomes not so big a problem. But with the private landowners, we've only had a couple or three, I think, in the entire time that have changed and said, we can't do this anymore. The land owner died, and then the next owner said, I want to build on that corner of the property or something like that. So. But it has not been a problem. They've been good. There have been people that have been out there the whole time. So that's been again. It's just like you would expect for Oklahomans to help out, and they did. So landowners, not a problem. That's not a problem.
What is the problem?
Everything how it all goes together is the problem.
Challenge.
And it's the challenge, yes. And I've always said that technology is one thing, and this is all sort of cleverly put together. So this is all solar operated and into battery backup, so we don't need any. You can put these anywhere. It goes back line of sight radio thing to the law enforcement telecommunication network of Oklahoma. Goes along their huge bandwidth, and then message switch in Oklahoma City and all like that. And it's lots of technology involved, but to me, that's not the hard. The hard part is keeping the thing going in a reasonable way, and that's much more politics and people working together. That's the hard part. Okay, we've seen some technology changes going along, which we've been like the internet, widely available, and we made use of that. That's a great thing in this case. Mm-hmm. And looking at it on your desk, say, what is it like in all of Oklahoma right now? There it is, or whatever you want to do is certainly possible now, but it's not. It's making that so with again, it has to be funded somehow, and it has to be very valid at all. It has to have a continuity of data quality, and we've been very, very careful about that to make sure that if you get some of our data, here's what you can count on from those data. And we do a pretty good job, probably even as good in some respects as National Weather Service, that our instrumentation, we have our own calibration lab. Everything before it goes in the field gets calibrated. We make sure it's measuring what we think it's measuring. When we had a temperature of minus 31 Fahrenheit at Nowata, when was that? Was it February, January of 2011? It was only minus 20 here in Stillwater or whatever. That's a new state record. Okay, they said, well, is that true or not? I don't. So we actually had two thermistors there at that site, and of course there's a data logger, which is the computer, sort of the onboard computer, and out of that goes they send the signals and it's radioed in. They took back those two particular instruments. They took it back to our calibration lab in Norman and ran it through the thermal calibration. They read exactly the same thing. That it was the right temperature. So we're in good position with the thing. The American Academy Advancement of Science calls us the gold standard, and so we're proud of that. Sort of embarrassed in a way, but we're proud of that because we have worked. A lot of people have worked very hard on this to try to keep things going and together. So,
have other states come in too?
The problem is always funding. We have a state where weather is pretty important. People are fairly weather aware, including our legislature, and so that's a good thing. And so because we were new and first kids on the block, we were able to go to the Weather Service and say, hey, here, this, and they provide a little money, and this or that other government organization provide us a little bit at first, and like that. They are trying to put together a network of networks nationally, and that which so far really hasn't come into fruition because they don't have very much to really fund it. Our main funding at the moment from Mesonet comes from the state legislature. It's a line item. It comes through us. It goes to regions, state regions for higher education, which they can, by the way, legislature can appropriate in this state, or does appropriate in this state. The higher regions do not have to spend it in the way that the legislature wanted it spent. So we always are careful about all this. I think the regions have been good to us, but it's sort of an interesting thing when you look at how this chain of command works. And so we're in a place where we think we have fairly solid funding from the state of Oklahoma. We're always with grants and contracts, making sure we have filled up everything we can, and like that. And the other states are not in a position to do that because we have a fine group of atmospheric scientists at the University of Oklahoma, and there's no end of atmospheric research projects that they can look at, and they have. That brings in bucks. There are other states that it just doesn't work like that. It just isn't. So there are in other states. I have a friend in New Jersey that put that network together, but it's already most of that I think were pre-existing sites, and it's not all exactly the same instruments at every site, things like that. So we were working off of one at the University of Nebraska had put together. We had them down for a little show and tell one time. We had a little conference about this and put a little meeting together about it. And they had a dial-up network, and once a day the computer would dial the phone out in the back end of Nebraska, and over the phone line would come back streaming the data. And that was the state of the art then. We had a different solution over this telecommunication systems that the state runs for your rap sheets and everything else. So, which has worked very nicely and stably over time. But you have to have lots of things putting together, and even Nebraska has never come to what we have now. So there are parts of states that are very well instrumented, I think, in the Central Valley of California because of all the agricultural interests, the high-value agriculture that they're well instrumented and things like that. But we're, again, the most sort of complete from soup to nuts operation in the country.
That's saying a lot, huh?
Mainly nuts, I think. We have a very good time with our employees and with the members of the steering committee has always been very, very unified. I don't remember a split vote on that committee. There may have been, but nothing of great importance. And so that the two major state universities going together and wanting something and having a group to try to make it so has been a very good run of things. And we just the scientists have respect for each other in that way. Oklahoma can be little old Oklahoma has the network. Everybody else says, "Well, we wish." When I go to meetings, I wish you had a network like that, because I've given all sorts of papers in my career having to do with this, that, and the other, having to do with the Meso network. And last decade, it's been on wind power stuff, and we've been able to chase all sorts of research because we had all that wind data. Some of the best wind data in the country are sitting in our archives. And so we haven't thought of all the uses for this stuff yet, I think. And you get somebody else new in the mix, another scientist, and they can think of something else they can do with it. So we're happy about that, I think.
The next 20 years should be pretty golden too, huh?
We hope so. We hope to be around. Maybe they'll let me retire off the committee. Possibly, but it's been so good for me. I have no reason to want to get off until they tell me to take a hike. But I would imagine with retirement from the university, I would sequence things in so that somebody else would take my spot from the OSU realm. But there's so many more things to do right now. thought in the atmospheric game is, yeah, we've measured near the surface so much, but what about like straight overhead, the column of air? And there's ways to do that now that there weren't 20 years ago. And so there's all sorts of, some of this GPS, geopositioning system stuff is actually used anymore by, and you can tell how much moisture is in the atmosphere between your hand unit and that satellite. I mean, it's just, there's just all sorts of things to be done. So we know that, and we want to be able to change or modify what we do to keep up with sort of some of the cutting edge stuff in science and keep ourselves viable. But yeah, the next 20 years, I think there'll be smart people here, and I think we'll have a Mesonet work.
That sounds like a good place to stop, doesn't it?
Maybe. Will we have a library in 20 years, or are they going to just go all digital? Digital librarians. Oh, I've done something bad again. So, yeah, it's a good story, I think.
Very good. Thank you for sharing it.
Sharing is caring, as we say here in the office. So, yeah, I'm appreciative of being able to tell the tale. Now, go find somebody else and have them tell you the right stuff.